It started with the rumble of heavy plastic on cracked asphalt, a sound barely noticed by anyone else on the quiet street. But for 10-year-old Leo, that sound, week after week, became a quiet promise he made to the lonely house next door. He just wanted to help his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Vance, with a simple chore. He never imagined that hauling trash cans could uncover a forgotten universe, or that on his birthday, she would give him something so impossibly wonderful it would change the stars themselves for him. This is a story about how the smallest act of kindness can echo into the biggest surprises. Leo lived in a world that felt both small and vast. The small part was a rented house he shared with his mom, Sarah. It was clean and cozy enough, filled with a lingering scent of toast from breakfast and the faint smell of cleaning supplies Sarah used after her long shifts waiting tables. Money was always tight, a quiet hum of worry beneath Sarah's tired smiles and quick hugs. She worked hard, often leaving before Leo woke up and coming home after he was already lost in his own world, leaving notes on the fridge dotted with hand-drawn hearts. The vast part of Leo's world existed mostly in his head and in his worn spiral notebooks. He wasn't like the other kids on the block, who ran in loud packs playing tag or kicking soccer balls. Leo was quieter, an observer. He'd sit on the front steps, sketching for hours, not bikes or houses, but swirling galaxies, sleek rockets piercing starry voids, planets ringed with impossible colors. He felt a pull towards the immense, silent space above, a stark contrast to the often complicated, worry-tinged reality of his life on the ground. School was a blur of lessons he understood, but rarely felt excited by. Hallways navigated with a sense of being slightly out of step. His real classroom was the night sky glimpsed from his bedroom window, even if only imagined most of the time. Next door stood the Vance house. Brick, tidy, with rose bushes guarding the front walk like disciplined soldiers. But behind the neat facade, there was an air of profound stillness. Mrs. Eleanor Vance lived there alone. Leo rarely saw her, except for brief glimpses through her lace-curtained windows, a shadow moving past, the flicker of a television screen. The neighborhood kids had their stories. She was grumpy. She didn't like noise. She hadn't been the same since Mr. Vance passed away years before Leo's family even moved in. They painted her as a character from a spooky tale, someone to be avoided. But Leo saw something different. He saw her on Tuesday mornings. Trash day, their shared driveway, a ribbon of aging asphalt, sloped noticeably downwards towards the street. Every Tuesday, Leo would watch from his kitchen window as Mrs. Vance, small and seemingly fragile in her sensible cardigan, would begin the slow, arduous process of wrestling her large municipal trash and recycling bins down that slope. Her movements were careful, deliberate, but underscored by visible effort. He saw the slight tremble in her hands as she gripped the handles, the way she braced herself before attempting the incline, especially with the recycling bin, which often seemed stuffed to overflowing. Sarah worried, too, in her own rushed, preoccupied way. "Oh, I hope Eleanor manages okay today," she'd sometimes murmur, glancing out the window while packing Leo's lunch. "Those bins look heavier than she is." There was a helplessness in her voice, the regret of someone with too many burdens and too little time to take on another, even one offered with kindness. Leo absorbed that worry, adding it to his own observations. He didn't see a grumpy recluse. He saw thin arms straining, a face etched with concentration, and, sometimes, a fleeting look of frustration or exhaustion. He saw someone struggling, alone, with a simple task that seemed determined to defeat her. He felt a knot tighten in his own small chest watching her. It wasn't pity exactly, but a burgeoning empathy, a silent recognition of vulnerability. Then came that Tuesday morning in late autumn. The air had teeth, biting with a cold wind that ripped the last stubborn leaves from the skeletal branches overhead. Rain threatened, the sky a bruised purple-gray. Leo was pulling on his sneakers to school, half listening to the weather report on the radio, when he saw Mrs. Vance outside. She was grappling with the recycling bin, which looked particularly full. The wind wasn't just blowing, it was attacking, swirling around like an invisible bully. Suddenly, a savage gust tore at the bin's lid, wrenching it open with a loud plastic clatter. A cascade of flattened cardboard boxes, newspapers, and plastic containers erupted, scattering across her damp lawn and the driveway like frantic escapees. Mrs. Vance gasped, stumbling backwards, her hand flying to her chest. She lost her grip. The heavy bin teetered wildly for a heart-stopping moment before crashing onto its side, spilling more of its contents. She leaned against the cold brick wall of her house, looking small and overwhelmed amidst the wind-whipped chaos. Panic flashed across her face, quickly followed by a look of weary resignation. Leo didn't think. He didn't weigh options or consider his shyness. He just moved, jacket half zipped. He burst out the back door and sprinted across the strip of wet grass separating their properties. The wind plastered his hair to his forehead. "Mrs. Vance!" he called out, his voice sounding small against the wind's roar. "Are you okay?" She looked up, startled. Her eyes, behind her glasses, widened first with surprise, then narrowed slightly with what looked like caution, maybe even distrust. Was this boy coming to laugh? To add to her troubles? "Young man." Her voice was thin, almost carried away by the gale. Leo stopped a few feet away, suddenly aware of his muddy sneakers on the edge of her neat lawn, aware of how small he must look. I can help pick that up," he offered, gesturing towards the scattered recycling. He braced himself for dismissal, a curt, "I'm fine," the kind of response the neighborhood legends foretold. Mrs. Vance looked from Leo's earnest, slightly breathless face to the debris fluttering across her yard, then back to the heavy, overturned bin. The tension seemed to seep out of her shoulders, leaving her looking frail. A long sigh escaped her lips, a visible cloud in the frigid air. "Well," she said, her voice low, hesitant. She scanned his face again, as if searching for something. That would be very kind of you." The words held a trace of surprise, as if kindness was an unexpected currency. Relief washed over Leo, quickly followed by purpose. He didn't wait for another invitation. He scrambled around her yard, chasing down escaped newspapers that threatened to fly over the fence, gathering soggy cardboard, retrieving a plastic milk jug that had rolled under a thorny rose bush, scraping his knuckles slightly. The wind tugged at the items, but he held on firmly, stuffing everything back into the wayward bin. Mrs. Vance watched him silently, her expression veiled, unreadable. Was she annoyed? Grateful? He couldn't tell. Once the scattered items were contained, he tackled the bin itself. With some effort, he managed to wrestle it upright. Then came the hard part. He grabbed the handle firmly with both hands, planted his feet wide on the slick driveway, and leaned his whole body into it. It was heavy, awkwardly balanced, and the slope worked against him. For a moment, it wouldn't budge. He gritted his teeth, picturing astronauts pushing against immense forces. He pushed harder, his muscles straining. Slowly, inch by painstaking inch, the bin began to roll downwards. He focused intently, his breath coming in short puffs, concentrating on keeping it straight, preventing another spill. Finally, he reached the curb. He carefully positioned the recycling bin next to her trash bin, which he must have managed earlier, turning the handles towards the street like the instructions showed. He straightened up, catching his breath, feeling a small sense of accomplishment. He looked back up the driveway. Mrs. Vance was still standing there, by her wall, watching his every move. A statue carved from worry and solitude. "Thank you," she said. The wind had died down slightly, and her voice, though quiet, reached him clearly. There was no mistaking the genuine gratitude in it now. It warmed him more than his thin jacket. "You're welcome, Mrs. Vance," he mumbled, suddenly shy again. He dug his cold hands deep into his pockets, gave a quick, almost imperceptible nod, and hurried back towards his own house. His heart felt lighter, buoyed by more than just the relief of finishing the task. He felt like he'd done something genuinely useful, something that mattered, even if it was just picking up trash. The image of her standing alone amidst the wind-blown mess stayed with him. That blustery morning wasn't a one-off. It became the start of something unspoken, a silent agreement forged in the chill autumn air. The following Tuesday, Leo woke up a few minutes earlier. He looked out his window. Mrs. Vance's bins were still sitting neatly by her garage door. He pulled on his shoes, grabbed his jacket, and slipped out the back door before his mom was even awake. He crossed the yard, the morning dew cool on his sneakers. He approached the bins, feeling a little nervous, wondering if she'd be watching, if she'd think he was being presumptuous. But he remembered her struggle, the relief in her voice. He took the handle of the trash bin first. It was heavy, but manageable. He guided it carefully down the slope, his movements practiced from watching her. Then he went back for the recycling bin. He repeated the process, positioning both neatly at the curb. As he turned to go back, he glanced towards her house. He thought he saw the edge of a lace curtain twitch in the living room window, but the door remained closed. No words were exchanged. But Leo didn't need words. He knew he was helping, so he kept doing it. Every Tuesday morning, it became part of his routine right after taking out his own family's smaller bins. Rain or shine, frosty mornings where his breath plumed and the plastic felt brittle with cold, or warm spring days when birdsong filled the air. Leo was there. Sometimes the bins were surprisingly light. Other times, they felt weighted with bricks, especially after weekends of yard work or spring cleaning. He'd feel the strain in his arms and back, sometimes needing to stop halfway down the driveway to catch his breath, but he never considered stopping. It felt right. After a few weeks of silent service, things began to change, subtly at first. One Tuesday, as he was heading back, Mrs. Vance's front door opened just a crack. "Thank you." A quiet voice floated out. Leo paused, surprised. "You're welcome," he called back, feeling a warmth spread through him. The next week, the door opened a little wider. Mrs. Vance stood there, holding her robe closed at the neck. "Thank you, Leo." She knew his name. He wondered how. Had she asked Sarah? Or just overheard his mom calling him from across the yard? It felt significant, this naming. "You're welcome, Mrs. Vance," he replied, offering a small, tentative smile. She nodded, her expression still reserved, but softer than he remembered from that first windy day. He caught a fleeting glimpse inside her hallway, polished darkwood, the faint, comforting scent of something like old books and dried flowers, the rhythmic, stately tick-tock of grandfather clock echoing in the stillness. It felt like stepping back in time, a world away from the cheerful clutter of his own home. Their interactions grew, slowly, like a cautious seedling pushing through compacted earth. One freezing morning in January, after Leo had carefully navigated the bins over a patch of treacherous ice near the curb, Mrs. Vance opened the door fully. Steam curled from a mug she held in her hands. "Leo," she called, her voice surprisingly strong against the biting air. "Wait just a moment." He stopped, curiosity piqued. She disappeared inside for a second, then reappeared holding a small, folded napkin. "Here," she said, pressing it into his mittened hand. "Warm your fingers." He unfolded the napkin. Inside were 2 plump golden brown cookies, still warm from the oven, studded with melting chocolate chips. The sweet aroma rose to meet him, mingling with the frosty air. "Wow. Thank you, Mrs. Vance." His voice was muffled by his scarf, but his eyes shone with delight. Oatmeal chocolate chip, she said, a hint of pride in her voice. Good for a cold morning. She watched him as he carefully balanced the cookies, pulling off a mitten with his teeth to take one. It was chewy, sweet, and utterly delicious. These are amazing, he mumbled happily through a mouthful. A tiny smile touched her lips, crinkling the corners of her eyes. An old family recipe. Now, hurry along, you'll be late for that school bus. The cookies weren't an every-week occurrence, but they appeared sporadically. Crisp ginger snaps on a damp March morning, delicate lemon shortbread as the days grew longer. Each offering felt like a small bridge being built between their two worlds, a quiet acknowledgement of his continued effort. They still didn't talk much during these exchanges, but the silence felt different now, less awkward, more comfortable. He started noticing more details about her life, piecing together a picture beyond the neighborhood rumors. He saw stacks of books piled high on a table near her window, novels, history books, even some thick volumes that looked like science texts. He learned she religiously filled her bird feeder, and she started pointing out the different visitors. The bright flash of a cardinal, the bossy chatter of a blue jay, the quick darting of chickadees, sharing their names with him as he turned to leave. He heard the faint, elegant strains of classical music, violins, pianos, drifting from her house more often, a gentle soundtrack to her solitary days. His mom, Sarah, watched this unfolding connection with quiet approval and a touch of wonder. "You're getting to good friends with Mrs. Vance, aren't you?" she asked one evening, watching Leo carefully wipe down the handles of the bins after bringing them back up the driveway. Leo shrugged, concentrating on his task. "She's nice, Mom. She made me cookies again today." Sarah smiled. "That is nice. It's good of you to keep helping her, Leo. Really good." She hesitated, then added softly, I think she appreciates it more than she lets on. She seems a little less sad lately, don't you think?" Leo considered this. He hadn't thought of it as sadness. Exactly, more like stillness. But maybe his mom was right. There was a little more light in Mrs. Vance's eyes these days, a little less tension in her shoulders. Of course, not everyone saw the budding friendship in the same positive light. One afternoon, a group of older boys were kicking a ball down the street as Leo wrestled a heavy trash bin towards the curb. "Hey, look," one of them shouted, pointing. "It's Vance's little garbage man." Another snickered. Leo's face flushed hot. He kept his eyes fixed on the bin, focusing all his energy on getting it to the curb without faltering. He pretended he couldn't hear them, but the words stung, sharp and unfair. He just wanted to help. Why did they have to be mean? Later that day, Mrs. Vance must have seen the lingering hurt on his face, or perhaps she'd overheard the exchange. As he turned to leave after receiving his quiet, "Thank you," she spoke again. "Leo," she said, her voice firm, "don't pay any mind to foolish boys. Kindness takes strength. Remember that." Her gaze was steady, reassuring. It felt like she was offering him armor against their taunts. He nodded, the heat in his cheeks replaced by a different kind of warmth. Her words and his mom's unwavering support. "They're just jealous because you're doing something good," Sarah had declared fiercely that evening, helped solidify his resolve. He wouldn't let teasing stop him. He kept going, through the sweltering heat of summer, when the asphalt felt sticky under his sneakers and sweat trickled down his temples as he strained against the weight, through the glorious, messy abundance of autumn, when fallen leaves made the wheels skid and stick. Taking out Mrs. Vance's trash bin became an immutable part of his weekly rhythm, as reliable as the sunrise. As his 11th birthday approached in late October, the routine felt comfortable, familiar, and deeply ingrained. He never once thought about getting anything for it. The occasional cookie, the quiet words of thanks, Eleanor Vance's growing warmth, and the simple satisfaction of knowing he was making a difference for her. That was reward enough. It was a steady point of purpose in his young life. He didn't realize the profound impact his simple, consistent presence was having on the woman next door. He didn't know that his weekly 10-minute chore had become a beacon, slowly coaxing Eleanor Vance out of the deep harbor of grief and isolation where she had moored herself for so many years. She began leaving her curtains parted wider, tending her roses with renewed interest, even exchanging pleasantries with the mailman. Leo's quiet dedication was gently reminding her that connection was still possible, that the world hadn't entirely forgotten her. About a week before his birthday, on a crisp, sunny Tuesday, Leo was carefully guiding the recycling bin, heavy with bundled newspapers, down the driveway. As he lined it up perfectly at the curb, Mrs. Vance's door opened. "Thank you, Leo," she said, her customary greeting. "You're welcome, Mrs. Vance," he replied, giving the bin a final nudge. She didn't retreat inside immediately. Instead, she lingered, one hand resting on the screen door handle, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Sarah tells me you have a milestone coming up next week." Leo blinked, surprised she'd initiate conversation beyond the usual thanks. "A milestone?" "Your birthday," she clarified, a rare, gentle smile gracing her lips. "Turning 11, I believe," she said. Heat crept up Leo's neck. He hadn't known his mom discussed him with Mrs. Vance. "Oh, yeah, next Tuesday." 11, Mrs. Vance repeated softly, her gaze drifting towards the sky for a moment. "That's a fine age, full of possibilities." She looked back at him, her eyes kind. "Well, a very happy birthday to you. For next week." "Thanks, Mrs. Vance." Leo beamed, genuinely touched that she remembered and mentioned it. He gave her a quick wave and jogged back to his house, feeling unexpectedly happy. He didn't give the exchange another thought. Birthdays were nice, simple affairs in their house. Sarah always baked a lopsided but delicious cake, and there was usually one carefully chosen gift he'd been dropping hints about for weeks, typically art supplies or a book about space. He certainly didn't expect anything from his quiet, elderly neighbor. The following Tuesday, his 11th birthday, arrived bathed in glorious autumn sunshine. The air was crisp, smelling of wood smoke and fallen leaves. Leo woke with that special birthday buzz, the feeling that the day somehow belonged entirely to him. Downstairs, Sarah had made blueberry pancakes, his absolute favorite, arranged in a smiling stack on his plate. Beside it sat a rectangular package wrapped in bright blue paper, the new set of fine-tipped sketching pens, and a pad of heavy-gauge paper he'd circled in an art supply catalog months ago. His heart swelled with love for his mom, knowing how she must have scrimped and saved. After wolfing down the pancakes and thanking Sarah profusely, he pulled on his jacket. It was still Tuesday. Birthday or not, the bins needed to go out. It felt odd not to do it. He wheeled his own family's bins to the curb, the plastic rumbling comfortingly on the pavement. Then, out of habit as much as duty, he headed across the lawn to Mrs. Vance's driveway. Her 2 bins stood waiting, silent sentinels by the garage. He tackled the trash bin first, rolling it down the familiar slope. Then he returned for the recycling bin. It felt lighter than usual today. As he carefully maneuvered it into place next to its partner at the bottom of the driveway, he heard the distinctive creak of Mrs. Vance's screen door opening. "Leo." He turned around. Mrs. Vance stood on her small concrete porch. She wasn't empty-handed. She was holding a large, somewhat bulky object, wrapped neatly in plain brown craft paper and secured with sturdy twine. It definitely wasn't cookies. "Happy birthday," she said, her voice warmer than usual. She gestured for him to come closer with a slight inclination of her head. Leo walked towards her porch, his boots crunching softly on a few stray leaves. A flutter of confused curiosity started in his stomach. Why would she get him a gift? And what could it possibly be? He stepped onto the worn welcome mat, looking up at her questioningly. Mrs. Vance, you didn't have to get me anything, he stammered, feeling awkward but also deeply touched. I know I didn't have to, she replied softly, her eyes holding a gentle light. But I wanted to. This is something, well, I thought you might appreciate it. She held the heavy package out to him. It was surprisingly weighty and had a distinct, intriguing shape beneath the concealing paper. Go ahead, open it now. His fingers, suddenly clumsy, fumbled with the tight twine knot. Birthday excitement mingled with a growing sense of anticipation. He finally worked the knot loose and slid the twine off. He carefully peeled back the edge of the brown paper. His eyes widened. He saw polished, dark wood, then gleaming metal. Brass? With trembling hands, he pulled the rest of the paper away, and he froze. His breath caught in his throat. Standing before him, freed from its wrapping, was a telescope, but not just any telescope. It wasn't a modern, mass-produced plastic thing. This was an instrument of breathtaking beauty and obvious age. The main tube was crafted from gleaming, heavy brass, polished to a soft golden sheen, warm despite the cool morning air. It rested elegantly on a collapsible tripod made of rich, dark wood mahogany, perhaps, with intricate brass fittings and adjustment knobs. It looked like something out of an old photograph, an heirloom, a tool belonging to a serious explorer of the heavens. Tucked beneath the twine he removed lay a roll of stiff, yellowed charts covered in complex diagrams and a slim, handsome book bound in dark, worn leather. Leo stared, utterly speechless. He reached out tentatively, running his fingers over the cool, smooth curve of the brass tube, then down the sturdy, finely grained wooden leg of the tripod. It felt solid, real, imbued with history and purpose. It felt magical. He looked up at Mrs. Vance, his mind struggling to process the sheer magnificence and unexpectedness of the gift. His eyes were wide with disbelief and dawning wonder. Mrs. Vance! This is amazing. He finally managed the words inadequate. It was mine, Eleanor Vance said, her voice quiet, tinged with nostalgia. Or rather, it belonged to a younger version of myself. A very long time ago. She smiled faintly. It hasn't seen starlight in many, many years. She nodded toward the charts and the leather book. Those are navigational star charts. Somewhat outdated now, I imagine, but the constellations haven't moved. She paused and added, and the book is a first edition of Burnham's Celestial Handbook, Volume 1. A classic guide for amateur observers. They were part of the set. Leo carefully, almost reverently, picked up the leather-bound book. The cover felt supple and smooth beneath his fingers, softened by decades of handling. He opened it carefully. The pages were thick, cream-colored, slightly brittle at the edges, filled with dense text, intricate drawings of celestial objects, and tables of data. The air escaping the pages smelled faintly of old paper and perhaps cedar. On the inside front cover, in elegant, faded cursive script, was an inscription. Eleanor M. Vance, Junior Astronomer, Crestwood Mountain Observatory, 1962. His head snapped up, his eyes locking with hers. The implication dawning on him. You worked at the observatory? The one on the mountain? You were an astronomer? The idea seemed incredible, connecting this quiet woman who struggled with trash bins to the vast, mysterious universe he loved. A wistful, faraway look entered Eleanor's eyes, softening her features. For a time, she confirmed, her voice gentle. A wonderful, albeit brief, time. I studied astrophysics in college. My dream was always to explore the cosmos. She sighed softly. Life, as it often does, presented different paths. Marriage, family responsibilities, the academic world was different for women back then. My husband, Arthur, encouraged me, but things changed. She brought her gaze back to Leo, focusing on him with sudden intensity. I've noticed your sketches, Leo, she confessed, a slight flush rising on her cheeks. Sometimes, when the wind catches a recycling lid just so, she gave a small, self-deprecating smile. Or when you leave your notebook open on the porch swing, I see the rockets, the swirling nebulae, the distant planets. You have it, the wonder, the same curiosity that drew me to the stars all those years ago. Leo felt his own face grow warm, a mixture of embarrassment at his private world being observed and an overwhelming surge of validation. She hadn't just seen his drawings. She had understood them. She recognized the longing behind the pencil strokes. I cleaned it up, Eleanor continued, gesturing towards the telescope, her voice regaining its steadiness, though laced with emotion. Polished the brass, oiled the fittings. It's still a fine instrument, and I thought perhaps it was time for it to look at the sky again, properly, through eyes that still see the magic in it. Her gaze was incredibly kind. Through your eyes, Leo. Tears sprang unexpectedly into Leo's eyes, blurring the magnificent telescope before him. It wasn't just a gift itself, though it was the most incredible present he could ever have imagined. It was the meaning behind it. The fact that this woman, whom he'd initially known only as a frail neighbor needing help, had seen a hidden part of his soul. She had recognized his deepest passion and chosen to share this precious, personal piece of her own forgotten dreams with him. It was an act of trust, of connection, that went far beyond neighborly kindness. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, unable to articulate the depth of his gratitude. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Vance. Eleanor, it's the best birthday present ever." She reached out then, a gesture that surprised him with its spontaneity, and placed a light but firm hand on his shoulder. Her touch felt grounding, warm. "You are a good boy, Leo," she said, her own eyes glistening slightly behind her glasses. "A kind boy. Your mother has raised you well." She squeezed his shoulder gently. "That simple thing you do week after week, taking out these cumbersome bins for an old woman, it means more than you can possibly fathom." Her voice dropped, becoming more intimate. "It's been very quiet here, for a very long time since Arthur passed. Your Tuesday visits, the sound of the bin wheels on the pavement, it became a small anchor, a reminder that I wasn't entirely invisible." In that moment, Leo understood. The guardedness, the solitude, the neighborhood whispers of grumpiness. They were layers built up around a core of profound loneliness and perhaps grief. His simple chore hadn't just been practical help. It had been a consistent, quiet sign that someone nearby cared. Someone noticed her existence. It was a tiny crack letting light back into a long-shuttered room. Just then, the back door of Leo's house opened, and Sarah stepped out, shielding her eyes against the bright sun. "Leo? Honey, are you okay over there? I thought I heard you talking." Her voice trailed off as she walked closer, her gaze falling upon Leo standing on Eleanor Vance's porch, the stunning brass telescope beside him, the discarded wrapping paper at his feet, the raw emotion visible on her son's face, and the unprecedented warmth radiating from Eleanor. Sarah stopped, her expression shifting from confusion to astonishment. "Eleanor? What? Goodness, what is this?" Sarah asked, her voice hushed with awe as she took in the beautiful, antique instrument. "A birthday gift," Eleanor replied, turning to Sarah with a smile that reached her eyes, erasing years of reserve. It was the most open, genuine smile Sarah had ever seen on her neighbor's face. "For Leo. He has quite the passion for astronomy, you know." Leo looked between the two women, his heart feeling impossibly full, threatening to overflow. He carefully, protectively, lifted the telescope's main tube from its cradle, cradling it like a priceless artifact. "Mom, She used to be an astronomer, a real one. At the Crestwood Observatory, he exclaimed, the words tumbling out in his excitement. Sarah's jaw dropped slightly as she stared at Eleanor. An astronomer? Truly? I had absolutely no idea. Oh, it was decades ago, my dear, Eleanor said softly, waving a dismissive hand, though her eyes shone with the memory. Ancient history. But she looked pointedly at Leo, then back at the sky. The stars remain. Perhaps Leo can show me what's new up there these days. She met Leo's eager gaze. Maybe, sometime soon, on a clear night, if your mother permits, we could set this up properly in your backyard. Have a look. Leo's face erupted in a grin, so wide it almost hurt. Could we? Really? Oh, Mom, please. Sarah looked from her beaming son to her smiling neighbor, this unexpected, beautiful bridge forming between them right before her eyes. The shared secret of the stars, unlocked by the simple act of taking out the trash. Yes, Sarah said, her own voice catching with emotion. Yes, I think that would be absolutely wonderful. That 11th birthday wasn't just a day Leo received an incredible gift. It was a day the universe truly opened up, not just in the sky, but between two houses, between three people on a quiet street. The telescope, magnificent as it was, became a symbol of something even greater. Connection born from kindness. Leo, with Sarah's careful assistance, transported the telescope and its accompanying treasures back to their house. He spent the entire afternoon lost in another world, carefully wiping down the polished brass, studying the intricate mechanisms, and poring over the yellowed star charts and the dense, fascinating pages of the Burnham's Handbook. His new sketching pens lay temporarily forgotten. The real cosmos had suddenly become tangible. A few nights later, the sky was exceptionally clear, a deep velvet canvas dusted with diamond chips. True to her word, Eleanor, insisting they drop the formal Mrs. Vance, came over after dinner. Leo had already set up the telescope in the middle of their small backyard, aiming it tentatively towards the brightest points of light. Eleanor, wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill, moved with surprising agility, her earlier frailties seemingly forgotten under the celestial dome. With patient expertise, she guided Leo's hands, showing him how to align the finder scope, how to smoothly adjust the focus knob, how to read the coordinates on the charts to locate specific objects. Her voice, usually so quiet, took on a new resonance, filled with the contained excitement of rediscovered passion. There, she murmured, peering through the eyepiece. See that bright one? That's Jupiter. Now you look, adjust the focus just so. Leo leaned in, breathless, and there it was. Not just a bright, but a discernible disk, pale and luminous, with 4 tiny pinpricks of light flanking it. The Galilean moons. Wow, he breathed. I see them. I really see them. Sarah watched from the back steps, nursing a cup of tea, a profound sense of peace settling over her. The murmur of their voices, Eleanor's calm explanations, Leo's excited questions, the shared wonder under the vast, silent sky. It was a scene she couldn't have imagined just months before. It was beautiful. Eleanor pointed out constellations Leo had only known from his drawings. Orion striding across the winter sky, Cygnus the swan flying down the Milky Way. She told him stories behind the names, myths mixed with scientific facts about stellar distances and nebular clouds. She showed him the fuzzy smudge of the Andromeda Galaxy, explaining it was another island universe, unimaginably distant. Think of it, Leo, she said, her voice full of awe. The light you're seeing tonight left Andromeda over 2 million years ago. It blew his mind. Their Tuesday morning ritual transformed. It was no longer just about the bins. It became their astronomy check-in. Did you manage to spot Saturn's rings last night, Leo? Eleanor would ask, her eyes sparkling with shared enthusiasm. Or Leo would rush over, even before tackling the bins. Eleanor, I think I found a crab nebula using the chart. It was faint, but I'm sure it was it. The connection continued to deepen, branching out beyond their shared love of the stars. Leo found himself stopping by Eleanor's house spontaneously after school sometimes. Not for any specific reason, just to chat. He helped her carry in a heavy bag of birdseed, admired the late-blooming chrysanthemums in her garden, learning their names. She, in turn, asked about his school projects, looked through his sketchbook with genuine interest, offering quiet words of encouragement that meant the world to him. She started sharing more about her own life. Funny anecdotes about her late husband, Arthur, stories of their travels, memories of her own childhood. The house next door no longer felt like a fortress of solitude, but a welcoming haven filled with books, music, and quiet wisdom. The changes in Eleanor were noticeable to the whole street. She started spending more time in her front yard, pruning her roses or sweeping the walk. She waved more readily to passers-by, occasionally engaging in brief conversations over the fence, her voice less hesitant, her smiles less rare. The neighborhood perception began to shift from the grumpy recluse to the quiet lady next door who knows about stars. Leo changed, too, fueled by Eleanor's mentorship and the tangible connection to the cosmos through his telescope. His quiet introspection blossomed into focused passion. He devoured library books on physics and cosmology. He excelled in science class, his insight surprising his teachers. His shyness didn't vanish entirely, but receded, replaced by the quiet confidence that comes from knowledge and purpose. He even started cautiously sharing his telescope views with a couple of the curious neighborhood kids, turning potential teasers into tentative allies under the night sky. Sarah watched it all, her heart full. The worry lines around her eyes seemed softer. Seeing her son thrive, seeing this unexpected, intergenerational friendship bloom, brought a sense of community and quiet joy to their small household. Eleanor often invited them both over for tea and her still delicious cookies, the three of them talking easily in her cozy, book-filled living room, the grandfather clock ticking companionably in the background. It had all spun out from such a small, unassuming thread, a boy, a bin, and a moment of spontaneous kindness. A 10-year-old deciding to help week after week, simply because he saw a need. He hadn't sought recognition or reward. He had simply acted out of empathy. Yet that simple, persistent act had resonated outwards, dismantling walls of loneliness, bridging generations, and uncovering a shared universe of wonder. It proved that kindness, even in its quietest forms, holds immense power. The power to change perceptions, to heal old wounds, and to connect us in the most unexpected and beautiful ways. Leo never looked at the stars, or his neighbor, the same way again. He learned that the most profound discoveries aren't always light years away. Sometimes they're right next door, waiting for a kind heart to notice. And every Tuesday morning, as he faithfully wheeled the bins down the driveway, he remembered the unthinkable gift wasn't just a magnificent brass telescope, but the precious, starlit friendship it represented, a testament to the enduring magic of human connection, sparked by the simplest act of helping.